Well, hello there, Dippers, and welcome back to round 19 of the Knuckle Sammich podcast. As always, I'm your host, Drake, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Thomas R. Shackelford.
Howdy, fellers.
We are back. We have fights this week, finally. And guys, you better be ready for this. We have a loaded card this week, a free card, actually. UFC Fight Night, Gaethje Vick. We're going to break down all those fights. We're going to talk about our boy Thug Nasty. He drilled into his beanbag. John Jones has been posting highlight videos and fight videos like crazy. And there's been a super fight announced on December 29th. But before we get to any of these hot topics today, Leighton C., producer, you know what to do. Welcome to the Knuckle Sammich podcast with Thomas R. Shackelford, a sauce on the side production. All right, so I'm really excited to break down these fights because normally whenever we break down the fights, Leighton C. doesn't really talk unless we end up bringing Chuck Liddell. But actually, he has got his 10 seconds of sweat today breaking down a fight, and he's actually going to pick a winner in a fight today. So that'll actually be pretty fun to do. So UFC Fight Night 135, Gaethje Vick. What really stands out to you on this card?
You know, top to bottom, it's a pretty fun card. It's stacked with not the biggest names in the business, but a lot of mid to high range tier. You know what stuck out to me the most is Mickey Gall's second fight of the night. Yeah,
Mickey Gall's second fight of the night. You have Warley Alvarez, who's the only guy to beat Colby Covington in MMA. Mm-hmm. He's on the undercard. And Andrew Sanchez, El Dirte, winner of one of the more recent Tough series, he's actually on the undercard too. So top to bottom, this card's loaded. We'll break down the main events. Shackelford, he'll look to get back on his horse. Didn't have the best showing of his career last week, but as I've learned, whenever he has a down week, he jumps right back on the pony and he fires off winners. So we'll start it off hot and heavy. Eric Anders versus Tim Williams. Anders opens as a minus 1,000 favorite. So he is a huge favorite in this fight. A little backstory on Anders. Nickname is Ya Boy, which is kind of odd. But he's a freak athlete. And he actually played football at the pinnacle of college football. Alabama. So that just shows how great of an athlete he is. Opens as a minus 1,000 favorite to Tim Williams. Plus
a 1,000 favorite?
Tim Williams is plus 650. So if Williams is able to pull this off, this is going to be one of the biggest upsets. Do you see any possible outcome that Tim Williams is standing at the center of the octagon with his arms raised?
No. Do not drop money on that. I know that 1,000 sounds good. It's not. You'll just be wasting whatever money you put on. Anders is a really good prospect. I think he was 11-0. They went ahead and threw him a bone and tossed him to Lyoto Machida in Brazil, his last fight. It was a close fight. It was close. I felt like maybe Anders didn't pull the trigger. He lost a split decision. Like I said, it was in Brazil against Lyoto Machida, so maybe
not going to win a decision there.
No, you're not going to win a decision. He's really big, athletic. Obviously, if he played at Bama, he's a gigantic dude. But big, strong, athletic, really well-rounded too. Tim Williams has had one fight in the UFC. It was about a 2-minute knockout, him being knocked out. And
hot start.
Yeah, not the greatest start. The first thing when I thought of him is he looked like all you movie fans out there. If you remember Stallone and Judge Dredd, he reminded me of Mean Machine, one of the brothers that he runs into out in the Badlands. He's this kind of tall. He's a mix between muscular and lanky. But stiff as hell. I just see him standing there and just Anders just TKO, running him over, getting the card off with a bang pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that Lyoto Machida fight was We talk about it all the time, how they take these young pups and throw them against the old dogs, the old declining dogs, and it's kind of that fight that they're looking, hey, we're going to get this guy's name out there. So that fight alone, even though he did lose the split decision, just shows you what kind of prospect this guy is, that if they're going to throw him against Lyoto Machida, he's a dog. I cannot believe that he fights at middleweight.
He's huge.
He is a massive human being.
I want to say he played linebacker at Bama, too. And he didn't just play. I want to say he was a starter, like 4-year starter type, that level of an athlete. Maybe I think he's one of those athletes that was really, really good in college football and can start for the best, but he's just a touch too small at linebacker to move on to the NFL. So
yeah, if he's if he's able to make 185, I still don't know how he does it. But he would be too small to go up and be a linebacker in the NFL. So I actually like that pick. I think Anders is going to just mop Williams, and I think it'll be a quick night. Quick night for Tim Williams. So we'll go ahead and move on to a flyweight matchup. John Morago opens as a minus 160 favorite to Davison Figueiredo. Plus 130 dog. He is undefeated as a mixed martial artist, so you always see something in the water here if he's opening as a dog and he's undefeated. What do you think's going to go down in this fight here?
Yeah, the Davison, if that's how you say his name, Davison, I watched a couple of his fights. I think he's fought 2 in the UFC, which, of course, it's 125 pounds, so he's a little guy. On his feet, he's kind of a wild man. I wouldn't say he really has any one style. He's just kind of throwing caution to the wind, throwing punches and kicks. Seems to be a little bit more of a ground fighter, like get him to the mat type fighter. And then you got Moraga, who's former title challenger, a little bit bigger of a guy, pretty good boxing, pretty good Muay Thai, good wrestler, and he has quite a few submission wins also. Something interesting about him, he kind of got thrown to Mighty Mouse a little early in his career, I thought, just because Mighty Mouse had started cleaning out that division already. He actually went on an 0-3 run. He lost 3 fights in a row, kind of had his back to the wall, and he's on a 3-0 stretch right now. And in my opinion, he's looked better than he ever has. And I'm picking Moraga because I don't think Davison's going to be able to just throw caution to the wind, drag Moraga to the mat, and then kind of have his way with him, which is kind of what he's been doing to dudes. This is definitely the biggest and best fighter that Davison has fought, and I think Moraga, with the way the title just changed hands, he might still have a little bit of a title run in him at this point. So I think Moraga is going to pick up the decision here. It'll be an interesting fight though, because like you said, Davison's undefeated. He's like 14-0, but he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, so I don't know if I can pull the trigger and pick him against a former title challenger that's looked so good his last 3 fights.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I think this is one of those fights that you kind of sit on your hands and wait till the last minute if you are going to be betting this fight, because I think the odds are going to swing. A lot of people that bet mixed martial arts kind of, if they see a dog and they see that he's undefeated, they're going to dive all over it. Yeah. So I would see these odds even swinging in favor of Figueiredo, and you can get Moraga at a bargain there. Yeah. So I would wait on this fight, and you're going to get great odds come fight night. So we'll go ahead and switch it up to a welterweight matchup. Brian Barberena opens as a minus 500 betting favorite against Jake Ellenberger, plus 135. I was pretty astonished to see the odds open up that big. But where do you see this fight between Ellenberger and Barberena going?
Ellenberger, man, where do we start with him? I can't believe he's fighting already. Do you remember he just got KO'd against Killa B like 2 months ago? You remember and I had a hard time picking Ellenberger for that one because I thought both guys had suspect chins. Killa B'd been knocked out by big right hands before, and Ellenberger's been knocked out by knees before, and He went down to another knee, I believe it was. I'm really surprised he's taking this fight. He's almost got no chin left.
Did you see, like, do you think that the UFC's kind of going with that barbaric approach now to where they're just, like, throwing guys out there with almost no recovery time after knockouts? Because, I mean, we saw it with Frankie Edgar, and we picked against Frankie Edgar because we saw him get knocked dead.
I don't know what the answer is to that. Some guys think they need to jump right back in there. Some guys take months and close to a year off. I think it's up to the fighter. It's not even up to the fighter. I think it's up to the fighter's coaches. You got to have a good enough coach or a team that's like, hey, man, you just got knocked dead, 45 days ago. Maybe take a few days off. I do know Ellenberger has switched a lot of camps. He was at Reign. He trained at the infamous, what's his name? The dude that trained Ronda Rousey. I can't think of his name right now. That kind of became a joke to everybody. He's bounced around, so there's really no telling where he's training at this point. So does his coaches have his best interest at heart? Maybe not. I'm going to lean towards not, just because he is a name. Maybe, money trickles down a little bit. Barberena, he was like the UFC killer there for a bit. They threw Northcutt at him. He beat Northcutt whenever Sage was undefeated and was going to be the next big thing. Then they threw Warlley Alves at him in Brazil. He beat Warlley Alves, who was also the next big thing, and like you said, the only guy to beat Covington inside the UFC. Then he drops a fight to Covington, beat up Joe Proctor, who was a tough guy, and his last fight was a loss to Leon Edwards, who just beat up Cowboy, who's a very good fighter. I don't see any way you're picking against Barberena. I think Barberena, mixes in striking. If I was him, I'd just wing right hands until one of them teed off on his head. But he's smarter than me, so he's probably going to mix in his grappling, which is pretty solid. And I'm going to say TKO round 2 somewhere. Ellenberger, he had such a big star there for a while, and it just seemed like, some of these dudes, they get clobbered once and they just never quite seem the same, and he was one of those guys.
Yeah, actually, if Barberena does knock Ellenberger out, he's knocked out both Ellenberger brothers.
Oh, he fought the other one?
Yeah, he fought him 2 fights right before he fought Sage Northcutt. Dude, that Sage Northcutt fight with Barberena was my favorite fight ever, because that submission was probably the worst submission win I've ever seen.
Sage had strep throat. And you remember after that he was posting pictures of his throat with the white pockets in the back? I remember texting
That's the biggest cop-out ever.
Oh, yeah. I remember texting him like, he's saying he's got strep throat. And I remember vividly you sent me back, oh, man, that can really wear you out, especially if they give you antibiotics. And I was like, he was dead in like a minute. Like, that's not from strep throat.
I loved whenever... I like how he blamed it on the strep throat, but like the choke that Barberena had thrown on him was nothing. I think it was an arm triangle or something, and as soon as he touched his throat, he just immediately tapped. So I'm thinking that if you get a fight with Sage Northcutt, all you have to do is just go out there and like that little karate chop to the throat, like just hit him with one of those, and he's gonna like tap immediately.
To his credit, it wasn't him saying he had strep throat. I think it was Dana White that was saying it and posted the picture.
Uncle Dana trying to bail out his boy.
Yeah. So hey, by the way, I almost sent this picture to Leighton today to clean his house. I don't know if you follow Northcutt on Twitter, Instagram, or anything, but he posts a lot of shirtless, buff pictures. Today he posts one of just him smiling into the camera with. I
wouldn't imagine. He doesn't look like a guy that would do that.
But he made me fall in love with him today. It said, "About to clean house." That was the caption. Just a picture of him shirtless. Made me fall in love with him. I want him as my husband, my house husband, just cleaning all day. I actually almost sent it to.
Was he meaning like cleaning house, like his UFC
no,
division?
It said like about to clean house, like he was standing in his house about to clean.
I feel like he's the only fighter in the UFC that takes the terminology "about to clean house" literal.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Everybody else takes a picture about to clean house. It's them like out there training. Him posting a picture about to clean house. He's literally about to clean his house.
He's clever. He's more clever than we give him credit for.
I don't know about that.
No, he's not.
No.
I'm being dumb.
That's funny. That's awesome. Sage Northcutt, a man of the people, future house husband. So we'll go ahead and transition to the women's strawweight matchup. I can't believe that this is actually on the main card. Most of the female fights recently I've been really jacked for. A lot of them either have like a really good backstory or it's just two awesome fighters going out there and going to war. This one has all the potential, in my opinion, to lay an egg. And it's Courtney Casey fighting Angela Hill. Casey opens as a minus 140 favorite to Angela Hill plus 120 dog. Where do you see this fight going other than putting me to sleep?
Angela Hill, she's had a lot of trouble getting fights for some reason. She's the girl, I don't know if you know this about her, but she's a big like comic book fan, video game fan, and for her weigh-in, she always dresses up as a character. I know she's been Vega from Street Fighter before. I'm trying to think of some others. What is that? Cosplay. She's big into cosplay. She's had a lot of trouble getting fights. She's more of a stand-up fighter. She's got her aptitude on the ground's not bad, but she's more of a stand-up fighter. She does throw caution to the wind and just have some scraps. She's had some really good fights. Courtney Casey, pretty vanilla. She okay stand-up, okay ground game. She's lost her last two. I'm looking for Angela Hill to pull out a decision, keep it standing, kind of touch her up. Unless Courtney Casey really comes out and wants to throw down and just get real down and dirty, I just see Angela Hill just piecing her up, kind of I don't want to say boring, but I think it'll be a decision.
Yeah, so there's a dog pick, first dog pick of the night. And usually whenever you pick a dog, that dog
I'm surprised
comes to eat.
How is Angela Hill a dog whenever the girls got a 7-7 record and coming off 2 losses?
Yeah, and it's not like they were impressive losses, like it's not like she went out there and just got caught or something like that. I agree with you though. I don't know how she's a dog. It makes me interested actually to the fight because I do think Angela Hill will win this fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a pretty decisive fight because, like you said, Courtney Casey doesn't really have that one thing that she can lean on where Hill can just kind of stand and bang with her.
Maybe Courtney Casey dropped weight classes. So she fought. No, her last 2 losses were to Felice Herrig and Michelle Watterson. And she may have actually lost to Jessica Aguilar too. Man, she may be on like a 1-4 stretch here. What I remember about her is she's really big. I want to say she was like a D1 volleyball athlete. I think she's a little bit more of a grappler, but I think Angela Hill takes this one. I just got that gut feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you though. That's an excellent dog pick in my opinion. So we'll go to the featherweight fight. And Andre Touchy-Feely, probably my favorite
I can't
nickname.
believe that's his nickname. I still cannot. Every time I read it, I cannot not laugh.
But I mean, like, what else are you going to be? Like, that is the perfect layup for a slam dunk of a nickname. Andre Feely. Touchy-Feely. That's so
perfect.
So good.
Perfect.
He's actually fighting one of the cooler guys in the UFC, and Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson, we actually got to meet him that night that we went up and watched those fights in St. Louis, and he is an awesome dude. Came out there with the purple blazer and the turtleneck, kind of looking fly.
Yeah.
But Touchy-Feely opens as a minus 105 dog to Michael Johnson, who's a minus 115 favorite. I think this is going to be a close fight. Potential to be fight of the night. And Michael Johnson is one of the oddest fighters if you look at his past wins and losses building up to this point. Who do you have in this fight, and who do you think is going to win?
Yeah, Michael Johnson, we met him. Super nice guy. we met him in St. Louis, basically his hometown, and he took a tough loss that night. Still came out and hung out with us. He's 17-13. We have Michael Johnson. His record, these are his last losses: Elkins TKO or submission, Gaethje TKO, Khabib submission, knocks out Dustin Poirier, then loses the Diaz and Beneil Dariush. He's got one of the craziest records. When you go down, he's beat some of the best guys in the division, and then he's lost to some middle of the road guys there. Also, another big thing to remember, this is 145, so I think that weight class is too little for him. I think he's got to lose too much weight for that. And we kind of know his Achilles heel is guys that will, touch him up a little bit, push the pace, wear him out, and he kind of fades.
That's Darren Elkins to the T.
Basically he beat the brakes off Darren Elkins for, a round and a half, and then Elkins did the Elkins and came back and beat him. Andre Fili's one of Elkins' teammates, by the way. But Fili's looked really good his last two fights. I think he's won his last 2 or 3. He's finally using that range. He was a guy when he came in the UFC, he was just bombs away, kill or be killed. But then his last few fights, he's really started to use that length. He's used his wrestling at times when he needed. He's really became a much smarter fighter. So I see him staying on the outside, using that range, using his superior conditioning, kind of wear Johnson down, maybe getting a TKO late in the third.
Yeah, I agree with you here. Johnson, the way that he kind of just faded off in his last fight really is a red flag for a guy who's taking another fight at featherweight. And you look at his previous fights, whenever he was fighting up a weight, he was fighting the cream of the crop. Yeah. Like you'd said, Khabib, and then even knocked out Poirier, which is so bizarre whenever you have a knockout against Poirier that is sandwiched by 2 losses. Yeah. So, we could get the Michael Johnson that comes out there and just looks phenomenal, the guy that did knock out Poirier, or we're going to get the guy that we saw just a fight ago against Darren Elkins, who comes out there, looks really good his first round, and then just fades. I wouldn't even call it fading. Yeah. That's like just a point to like blacking out.
Yeah, I mean he's what I said his record was 17-13. He's a 500 fighter, and sometimes he looks. It's weird, sometimes you get a 500 fighter that kind of looks the same every time. That's just losing close fights. Michael Johnson's a 500 fighter that, in one hand he looks amazing, and then on the other hand he looks bad. So he may hold the title for most hot and cold fighter maybe ever.
Yeah, I agree with you. I say it all the time, even on the Mothership show. Dr. Jackal, Mr. Hyde, the guys who show up 50-50, and Michael Johnson's one of those guys. I would have to lay the money on Fili, especially being the dog, and I like him in this scenario. And I really think that a lot of people are going to gravitate towards the name Michael Johnson because he is so well respected in MMA, and a lot of people do like him as fans. And I could see these odds even getting better for Touchy-Feely and him being, a plus bet by the end of the week here. So we'll go to our headliner, James Vick, who is also in he's in candidacy to be one of the top nicknames of the night in the Texecutioner. That's a pretty sweet nickname. So James Vick opens as a minus 160 favorite to Justin Gaethje, who's a plus 130 dog. This is where Leighton C is going to get in his 10 seconds of sweat. We'll let him get in his fight pick. So, in case you guys don't know, Leighton, the way that he picks fights is that he basically treats it like a cockfight. He sees both people right before they walk out into the cage, doesn't really know anything about the fighters, but he makes a pick. And this week, Mr. Shackelford actually gave Leighton C some homework. He sent Leighton C on 2 fights to watch. One fight of these guys is a piece, and he will pick your winner for the main event at UFC Fight Night 135. Leighton C, what did you see?
Okay, so the first fight is Johnson versus Gaethje. With Mr. Shackelford, can you please tell me what you thought of this fight earlier in our conversation?
What
Johnson
I thought of
versus
the fight?
Johnson versus Gaethje.
What'd you call it?
It got award. I didn't call it. It got awarded the fight of the year.
Oh.
Not me calling that. At the MMA awards, it actually got fight of the year.
Oh, well.
Maybe I didn't make that clear.
You did not.
You thought Shackelford just gave it the award of fight of the year.
I did. It's had very subjective over the text message. But, okay, so they come out, I picked Johnson because he's like the better athlete. But then I saw Gaethje's back tattoo, and then I just knew he was one of those kids who used to find the playground for fun. And he used to bring knives to school and shit like that. He probably smoked pot at age 13, shot up at age 17, became an MMA champion at age 18. So, it's a good fight. A little bit long for my liking. Both guys...
A little bit long?
A little bit long.
It was like the Ultimate War for 13 minutes.
Both guys either have an iron jaw or they have hands made of pudding. Making a whole lot of contact, but they weren't really falling or getting wobbly. But cardio is a big part of this guy's training for this fight. They knew it was going to be a battle. Johnson did almost finish in the first round. In round 2, both guys looked really gassed, and Johnson almost finished it again, but Johnson just can't finish anybody, I don't guess. At the end of the second round, kind of reminded me of Kimbo and Dada.
Oh, man.
Two guys just so exhausted they're falling over, just wildly throwing their hands up in the air at each other. But then Gaethje ends it with a knee. So that was Johnson vs. Gaethje. Yeah. I don't know if it's fight of the year, but it's a good fight. The next fight was Vic and Marco Polo. I really thought Vic was cheating because he had his eyes open, so I picked him to win. And it appears that people having their eyes open is Polo's weakness because Vic pretty much kicked his ass for the entire 2.5, 3 minutes that they fought. Then Vic died after the ride and he won by TKO. I'm not really sure how good Vic is because I needed him to see him fight somebody whose weakness is not guys who can see. So I'm kind of up in the air how good Vic is. But he looked pretty tough. He's pretty quick. Pretty strong striking from this fight.
So who's your pick? Who are you picking? Gaethje or Vic?
Gaethje or Vic? I don't know. I wish I knew how much cardio Gaethje was going to do for this fight.
I think you're mistaking cardio for ass whooping. Him and Johnson just clobbered each other for 13 straight minutes.
You don't think that takes some pretty good cardio? You don't think that takes some pretty good cardio?
How many people would have been standing after that first
That's
round?
what I'm saying. Those head blows will take the cardio right out of you.
I don't know. They could have hands of pudding.
Hands of pudding. I love that. I've never heard that. You just got it. You just came up
with Michael Johnson's new nickname, Hands of Pudding. So sweet.
And what if he does? I don't know. I'm going to go with Vic because Vic had the ability to finish inside one round.
So you're picking Vic.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good breakdown. I love the Hands of Pudding. That's a good.
The Hands of Pudding.
Just so you know, Vic is the favorite for this fight. So
look at that.
So latency might actually be your odds maker, and he had a tough time picking it. Minus 130 or plus 130, minus 160, pretty close odds. Latency, your local Vegas bookmaker.
I'll try and give a little bit better breakdown. So Gaethje came in the UFC. He was 18-0. He's lost 2 fights. One to Eddie Alvarez, which was a back and forth fight. It was a back and forth fight, and then late in the third, I felt like Gaethje was kind of coming on, might be able to steal it. He started dipping his head, and I want to say Alvarez hit him with a knee and knocked him out. Didn't knock him dead. I remember he hit the mat and he got up, and the ref had already stopped it, though. But it was a good stoppage. It was one of those that needed to be stopped because neither guy was going to quit before they were dead. And essentially his fight with Poirier went the same way. Very back and forth. Late in the fight, Poirier made an adjustment and started hitting some body shots on him, and that really tore him up. And he ended up getting the TKO stoppage again. So Gaethje's whole world, his whole game plan is to dish out as much punishment as he can while absorbing as much punishment as he can. He has no care in the world about taking punishment. His main weapons are his leg kicks, which kind of brings in the doling out damage. And then he's got good strong punches, but he's best when he can get like a left hand collar tie and then use uppercuts. So his best weapons kind of contradict each other, but he's so good at those leg kicks he can be in close enough to still have that collar tie and the uppercut and still leg kick. He's just got the dexterity to do it. Now his defense is what we worry about here. He has no defense. His defense is his offense. Basically, he goes forward, and then he'll stop, let that guy get off some punches, and go forward again, and one guy's going to fall. So this fight will end in a TKO or KO. I have no doubts about that. Gaethje doesn't move his head at all. His only.
It's a bold strategy for fighting.
I mean, Vic made that joke about Gaethje being Homer Simpson. He pretty much is. I mean, that's just his thing. He either puts a smashing on him until they just wilt and give up, or he takes as much damage as they can dole out, and then he wilts them. And at the highest level of the sport, that's almost impossible. All those guys want to fight. All of them want to be there. They're making quite a bit of money at the level that he's doing it. And what I was saying about his head movement, he doesn't move his hand. He almost does like an old school boxer shell where he brings his hands up real high. But he does. They're not close together, so they can still get punches right down. They can still get punches right down the pipe, and his body's open, which is what Poirier did to him. Vic, I think, is like 6'4".
He's 6'3",
6'3",
actually, yeah.
so he's
Which
super tall.
Huge.
I think he's got a 76.5-inch reach. Former Golden Gloves boxer. He's got a pretty solid submission game with those lanky arms. God, this one's the problem with this one. This is almost a James Vick pick. Almost instantly, but the things that are holding me back are Vic hasn't fought that high of competition.
That's what sticks out to me.
Not
right
necessarily his fault. He's been calling out people in the top 10 for like the last 2 years. Nobody will fight him.
Who wants to fight a guy who's 155 pounds that is 6'3"?
Yes.
That obviously is a good striker.
Yeah, not a lot of people. I mean, he doesn't use his range that well. He kind of hops in, he hops out. He's been KO'd. Beneil Dariush KO'd him a couple fights ago, which is his lone loss aside from his Ultimate Fighter loss, which was considered like an amateur fight. They didn't fight a full 3 rounds, so he's actually had 2 losses. That one was to Michael Chiesa. But so Vic hasn't fought the high-level competition that Gaethje has. That doesn't mean he's not capable of. He just hasn't. And Gaethje has already said a bunch of times that he's going to change his game plan up, that he's going to start wrestling. Because apparently he was a very, very good college wrestler. Like, made the NCAA tournament a few times.
Well, Justin Gaethje, whenever I first watched him fight, they talked about it was whenever he had, like, kind of right as soon as he had broke onto the UFC, the first time I'd ever watched him. And they just talked about his wrestling, talked about how phenomenal it was. Yeah. And I'm thinking that this guy's just going to drag him across the mat and just mop him up. And he comes out there and just kill or be killed mentality.
Yeah, he never uses it. And
no, he does not.
He's got one of the smartest coaches in the game, Trevor Whitman. And when you listen to other fighters that are friends with Whitman or coach under Whitman, like he gets pissed because Gaethje doesn't. He just won't change his fighting style. And then now Gaethje said, "I'm going to change my fighting style. I want to get some wins. I'm here to get the belt." And maybe he now knows that to get the belt, he can't fight that way. You know, I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to pick Gaethje. I'm going to pick Gaethje. But this kind of hinges on if he's actually going to fight the way he can fight. If he just goes out there, you know, balls to the wall, does the Homer Simpson, and Vic will just tee off on him. And it won't be a long fight because Vic's got some sting behind those punches.
Not hands of pudding.
No, he does not have hands of pudding. If you're from Texas and your name's the Texecutioner.
That's his nickname?
Yes, you don't have hands of pudding. He's got hands of baby back ribs.
So hands of baby back ribs.
He's got slabs of baby back ribs that are going to be coming at Gaethje's face. I want to pick Vic, but I'm going to go with Gaethje. I'm going to go with Gaethje. I'm going to say he's a dog. He gets the win and gets back in the win column. I think the level of competition and just maybe he's just going to be a step above Vic. I think with those leg kicks, and dear God, let him use some of that wrestling to wear Vic down a little bit, and then he'll be able to pick it up later. So against practicality, against Vegas, against everything we've seen of Justin Gaethje, I'm going to pick him anyways. You're either with me or you aren't. If you're with Leighton, you're wrong no matter what he said. Gaethje's just too fun of a guy. I don't think he loses 3 in a row.
I agree with you. And my reasoning is I don't know why. If I look at it, who's the better fighter? I'm going to go with Gaethje just because Gaethje is a good fighter. He's a phenomenal fighter. He's just not a very smart fighter. Yeah. And I think that, getting a couple losses for a guy, like you said, that was just on an absolute tear, that's an ultimate eye-opener for these guys. And, if he loses one more, he's flirting with dropping down, getting that low-level competition, and that's nothing that this guy's used to. No. Ever since he's got in, made a name for himself, he's been fighting top-level guys. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends in this fight because Vic really hasn't been fighting the top-level competition that Gaethje is, and Gaethje has had those eye-opening experiences where James Vick has not. James Vick's never, with the exception of his one knockout loss, he's never really been drug into the deep, dark waters. He's never really had to overcome a lot. And in this fight, it's all going to be about who is going to be able to overcome the most. Because like Leighton had said, that fight against Michael Johnson comes out there and drums him for a round, and he still finds a way to win that fight. And Michael Johnson looked good. Yeah. Michael Johnson looked phenomenal that fight. So that was Michael Johnson A game. And Michael Johnson A game, like we had said, is up there with the best of them. Even beating Dustin Poirier when he's on his A game. Yeah. So if Gaethje's able to pick up a win like that, I love him in this spot. Being a dog against James Vick, I think he's going to be able to pick up the win just because he's been in those deep, dark places that a lot of fighters in the UFC have to see before they are able to win fights like this.
Yeah. The other thing about Vick is he's not. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, but he doesn't look like he has that confidence in there. He keeps his hands. There are some technical things that Gaethje can pick up on. I watched probably 4 or 5 fights of Vic. He keeps his hands way low. Why does he keep his hands way low? Because he's got a 76.5-inch reach, so he doesn't have to keep them up to his chin because a lot of those guys aren't getting close enough. So if you crowd him, that overhand right's going to be there. That's what Dariush got him with. That Marco Polo fight, and that's actually the dude's name, Marco Polo. Not joking. You can look it up. He had a lot of success with leg kicks early on Vic before he got stung by a punch. So there are some technical things that Gaethje can pick up on. He's got a very good overhand right. He's got the best leg kicks in the business. There's some things he can pick up on. I would just love to see him maybe bob, maybe weave, dip
move your
a
head
little.
Twice in this fight.
If he just moves his head off the line, maybe twice, who knows? Hell, maybe shoot a double leg. You've spent the first 18 years of your life taking dudes down, being one of the best dudes in the nation at it. Why don't you try and do that? Yeah. If we see that guy, and I know Trevor Whitman, if I can see the fundamental holes in Vic's striking game, Whitman, who's one of the best striking coaches ever in MMA, I know sees them. I just think there'll be an upset here, which is crazy because Gaethje's ranked way higher than Vic. Yeah, Vic's the favorite. Vic's technically the favorite. So
yeah, and that just kind of leads back to the level of competition. If you lose to the number 3 guy, you're not going to fall as far.
Yeah, true, very true.
And if you're able to pick up a win there, you're going to hang around. Yeah. I do love Gaethje in this position. Like you'd said with James Vick, is that he has that reach, but it seems like he rarely uses it. Like he uses it whenever I've watched him to just kind of keep people away and not necessarily to strike at distance. Yeah. He just keeps them away so he can kind of recover, and then he goes back and engages, and he gets too close. And against Gaethje, that's not going to pan out. I do really like Gaethje here, and I honestly thought you were going to pick James Vick. This fight...
I've thought about it. I mean, I had all these other fights picked on the way in. I watched all of Gaethje's UFC fights. I've seen some of his before, and I've seen a bunch of Vic fights too. I'm a big fan of Vic, and I'm bummed that we're in a business of prize fighting, and dudes don't want to fight a guy. Like he legitimately cannot get a fight. That bums me out. That'd be like, you showing up to work and be like, oh, hell, I ain't doing that today. That's your job, man. No, hell, I ain't doing it today. I know that's what a lot of people do, but that's not what a lot of people should do. So, right. Man, it's going to be a fun one. There's no way this is going to... If this goes to the distance, I owe everybody $1.
Yeah.
I ain't never going to pay you, but I owe it to you.
I'm writing that down.
If James Vick wins this fight, you're bringing the beers next week.
I have to last 2 weeks.
So we'll go for a threesome there. But yes, I do like the Gaethje pick. Vic, I like Vic a lot. He's one of those lower level guys that I thought could make some noise up at the top. But I think this is just a bad matchup for his style and going against Gaethje, who just loves to throw bombs. So just to recap the picks before we get into some of the fun stuff on this show. Shackelford had picked Eric Anders, John Marega, Angela Hill, Andre Touchy-Feely, and Justin Gaethje.
And Barberena.
That is 3 dog picks of his 6 fights. So definitely be betting these, because if one of those dogs hit, we will howl. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some of the fun stuff here. So Bryce Mitchell actually just tweeted, "Mama, we made it." Tags Sports Center and says, "Sports Center is now talking about my nutsack." So in case you guys don't know, Bryce Mitchell, he is one of the great personalities in the UFC. He goes by the nickname Thug Nasty. He's not kind of a wild man. He is the definition of a wild man. Like, I'm pretty sure if you guys ever watched you remember the Turtle Man? That goes, that guy? I'm pretty sure that's his grandpa, because Thug Nasty is that dude. So what happened and what injury did Bryce Mitchell sustain today?
When he broke it down on Twitter, and he did it in a joking way. Like he wrote up this big old thing, and then about halfway through, and he's like, "No, I'm not joking, fellers. LOL." The gist of it was he was working on something. He was lining up a board, and if any of you guys are rich bastards that ain't never worked for your grandpa or dad or uncle, he was lining up a board on a wall.
For the Turtle Man.
Yeah, for the Turtle. He was working for the Turtle Man. He was lining up a board on a wall. I think he was on a ladder. I'm not sure, but he had the electric screw gun in his pocket, I believe, and he had both hands up, lining up the board so he could pencil it in, see where he was going to put it. And I don't know if he bumped the wall, bumped something, but it went off in his pocket and drilled through his ball sack. And
what an injury!
You can't make that up. I mean, he posted a picture of his bloody underwear in the hospital. MeUndies came out and said they were going to send him some pairs. Look, that's why I wear briefs, guys. I'm a briefs guy. I've been a briefs guy my whole life. Not a boxer's dude, because those things are hanging out anywhere. You never know when a screw gun's going to jump up and bite you.
That is true. As far as MMA injuries, where does this rank on your list? Because forever, I feel like Anderson Silva was sitting on top of the I guess,
on
top of the throne.
I think that's a different realm, though. That's like an in-competition injury.
No, I'm just going all MMA
So,
injuries.
when I think of
these guys are never off.
freak MMA injuries, I can think of 3 off the top of my head. One was basically Ken Shamrock's about to walk out to fight Kimbo, and somehow gets a cut on his forehead and doesn't walk out, and that's how Petrozelli came out, ended up knocking out Kimbo. Now, word was that Shamrock used the old pro wrestling trick and cut his own forehead so he didn't have to go out and take the L. That one's up there. Kevin Randleman, rest in peace to the monster. He was warming up in the back, slipped on some pipes, concussed himself, couldn't fight. That was in one of the early UFCs. So those are, I don't count as competition. I'm going to go with Thug Nasty. Ball sack drilling takes the cake by about 1 million. I mean,
by far.
By about 1 million. I don't know that it can ever be undone. And the humility and humor that he's taken it is if you don't follow him on Twitter or any social media,
he's a must-have.
You need to follow him because he is hilarious. And he's just joking about it. And he's like, put out this thing, don't worry. And I can't read his tweets without talking country. So he's like, don't worry, fellers, my beanbag's okay. We'll live another day. Like, it's just hysterical. He actually got kicked off Twitter. PETA kicked him off because he was posting some I think he was making some squirrel jerky or something and put up a picture of it. So he has got some hate from some of the vegans out there. But if you're not a vegan and you love life, you need to follow Thug Nasty.
Yeah. Do you think that he ever considers changing his nickname from Thug Nasty to The Drill?
Maybe now.
Yes, that would be awesome.
I was always skeptical of the Thug Nasty because he's the scraggliest little white hillbilly you've ever seen. So when they asked him, how'd you get your nickname Thug Nasty on the Tough Show, I don't know, some of his hillbilly buddies gave it to him. So the drill sounds good. The drill bit, maybe.
The drill bit.
I
like
that. Just wear briefs, everybody. Briefs are better.
If you don't learn anything from today, wear briefs. So we'll touch a little bit on John Jones. John Jones been posting a lot of videos of him training, most specifically in his garage. So I feel like after this fight, he's going to start screaming, "I train in a garage." So that's kind of a little joke for Shackelford there. There's a big UFC card coming up in New York. Do you see there being any avenue for John Jones to appear on this card?
I've heard a ton of rumors. The fact of the matter is, we have no clue what's going on with this USADA case. It's basically in deliberation. I think what's happening with it is he hasn't really pled guilty, but he doesn't have an argument of why he failed that test. But he passed a bunch of tests, failed one, passed one later that day, passed one the next day. The timeline that he got it almost supports his theory of somebody spiked his drink or something with something. So, but because he's had the failed test before, it looks bad. And the USADA guys and Jeff Nowitzki, they're basically saying we don't know what the hell's happening, with that test, but we know it popped, so they got to do something about it. The rumor mill is that they're waiting to call a headliner for that New York card, which would be the one that Poirier Diaz is on. They're waiting to see if John is eligible for it. And the other rumor I heard was it was going to be John Jones versus Anderson Silva. So that's clearly a headliner. So when you think you got Poirier Diaz fighting, what's going to be bigger than them? Now, some people are saying Nunes and Cyborg, which I don't think is bigger than Poirier and Diaz, even though it'd be for a title. But John's been putting out. When he's in trouble, he kind of goes quiet on social media, and then in the past, he's gotten louder and louder as he's gotten closer to his fights. So I'm gonna say there's a real possibility that the UFC is gonna wait to see if he gets eligible to come out for that New York card. And how fun would Anderson Silva versus John Jones be in New York? That'd be fun as hell.
Oh, that would be an absolute phenomenal fight. And, some people will look at it and say, it came a few years too late. But I still think that there would be a great aura with that fight, and it would honestly be a fun fight. Because unlike, we watched Anderson Silva in UFC 200 actually put on a pretty good show against DC and touch him up a little bit.
Yeah.
And if DC didn't just drag him to the mat and kind of, use his size and use his wrestling, that would have been a different fight. And I think that John Jones would not do that. Coming out, I think he's one of those guys who's always like, no matter what this guy's great at, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to beat him at that game. So I would see that just being basically a chess match of a standing fight, and it would be a fun fight to watch, and I hope you're right. I hope it does become the headliner there. So there was actually a headliner that was announced, a super fight, December 29th, Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg. This fight is what everybody that follows the women's mixed martial arts has kind of been screaming for over the last year. What do you look for in this fight? Maybe not necessarily picking a winner yet, but how do you think this fight will unfold?
This one, it'll be a tough fight. You don't know. I guess we really don't know how hard Amanda Nunes hits. She's really touched some people up and hurt them, but does she hit harder than Cyborg? I'm gonna say no. So then you think, well, is she gonna be able to take Cyborg down? Maybe. I mean, that's kind of been Cyborg's only tiny weakness. Every now and then she gets taken down. So super fun fight. I think Amanda Nunes kind of has a tough time making the 135 anyway. So we'll kind of see her at a little bit more of that natural weight for her. It should be fun. In my opinion, the winner of this goes down as the GOAT for women's MMA.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because, Cyborg's just been so dominant. Yeah. Amanda Nunes has looked absolutely
she
phenomenal
beat Ronda.
recently.
Nunes did. She beat Misha. Did she fight Holly? I think the only one she hasn't fought is Holly, but she's beat all the other ones that you would consider. Both of these girls has beat every other girl that's kind of considered Mount Rushmore of women's MMA. So winner of this takes the women's MMA GOAT Cup, and I think this will be Cyborg's last MMA fight.
Gut check. We'll obviously break this fight down in December when this is coming around. Who's going to win this fight?
I think Cyborg. I don't see any. Even we'll break it down more, and there might be some changes, but I don't see any reason to pick against Cyborg.
No, I agree. And also, for all you MMA fans out there, which if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously are, be listening to the Mothership Show on Mondays because we have a phenomenal guest list coming out for you guys. We've actually recorded interviews with Max Roshkoff, and he'll be airing this Monday. We have Jacob Kasper. Excellent interview. We actually have that recorded for the following week. So those are two big guys in MMA. Roshkoff actually fights for LFA, a big up-and-coming organization, and you're going to hear a lot about Roshkoff. And I honestly think we're going to be breaking down one of his UFC fights within the next 2 years.
Probably so.
And we also have Kyle Driscoll, who will be airing. We haven't interviewed him yet, but he has agreed to come on to the Mothership Show and talk. And he actually fights this weekend for the LFA title belt. So, guys, if you're MMA fans and you kind of want to get a little bit of a backstory on a guy before you hear his interview air live or air on the Mothership Show, definitely be watching. It's this weekend, LFA, and it's on Access TV, I believe. So, guys, be checking that out. We have some awesome interviews for you coming up soon. Shackelford, anything before we wrap this bad boy up?
The Roshkoff, and if you're into not just MMA, both of them are NCAA wrestlers. Casper, actually an NCAA placer in the big tournament. Roshkoff has competed at EBI. So a lot of cool stuff coming up, man. I'm dropping in everybody's DMs trying to get people to come on, from the BJJ world to wrestling to MMA. Anybody that will have their little mail envelope open, I'm dropping a blind. And thankfully these guys got back to us, and the interviews are great. Can't wait for them to air.
So just a little warning to all dudes out there. We are coming for your DMs.
Maybe a few girls. So should I drop like one to a girl for every, not like a fighting girl, but I'm talking like Instagram model girl, just one for every 10 guys I drop, just to make sure
you should
I'm not getting weird?
Yeah, you should keep a healthy number there. Because I feel like I'm getting in that same dilemma that you are, where I'm like, okay, I am 112% more likely to dive into a dude's DMs at this point in my life than any female out there, which is a pretty good place to be, I guess. And on that note, for Drake, for Leighton, for Mr. Shackelford, Dippers, as always, stay saucy.